Have you ever just, known something without having, like, the faintest idea why you knew it?
Oh, absolutely. All the time.
Right. Like you're walking down the street, maybe heading to get a coffee like you do every single morning, and a sudden, completely inexplicable feeling makes you, well, change your commute. You turn down a different street.
Yeah, or you meet a total stranger and within half a second, you instantly trust them with your life. Or conversely, you feel an overwhelming urge to get as far away from them as physically possible.
Exactly. And you have no evidence. You have zero data. There is no logical reason for the reaction at all. It is just, well, a feeling.
And it is a completely universal human experience. But the weird thing is, it entirely defies how we are taught to understand the world. I mean, from a very young age, we're told to be rational.
Right. Show your work.
Exactly, show your work. We're taught to look for the evidence, gather the facts, and build a case before we make any decision. But that internal alarm bell, that sudden flash of knowing, it doesn't wait for evidence, it just arrives.
And that is exactly what we are plunging into for today's deep dives. We have a really fascinating translated essay on the table today by a writer named Su Feng, and it's titled, Follow Your Intuition When Necessary.
It's a great piece.
It really is. And the mission for this conversation with you today is to explore a fairly bold claim from the source, which is that intuition isn't just some, random, fleeting feeling or a lucky guess.
Yeah.
In this framework, it's actually our sixth sense, like the most foundational level of our spiritual perception. So we're going to look at some pretty wild historical and personal examples from the text to see if maybe we should be trusting our gut over our highly trained logical brains. Okay, let's unpack this. Where do we even begin to define something as invisible as a gut feeling?
Well, the foundation in the text starts with a pretty simple categorization of how we interact with reality. So we have human senses as we traditionally understand them, right? Sight, hearing, taste, smell, touch.
The basic five.
Yeah, the basic five. We all accept those without question as our data gathering tools. But this framework introduces a crucial sixth one, which is spiritual perception. And intuition is defined as the very baseline, like the most fundamental manifestation of that spiritual perception.
I think we need to separate this from just taking a wild guess, though.
Oh, totally.
Because, if I sit here and guess that a coin will land on heads, and it does,
Yeah.
I wouldn't call that my spiritual perception kicking in. That's just, a 50-50 probability.
Yeah.
So what are the actual mechanics of this?
That distinction is incredibly important. The text breaks down the anatomy of a genuine gut feeling into three distinct characteristics.
Okay.
So the first is instantaneity. This means there's zero complex reasoning involved. You don't sit down with a pros and cons list.
Right.
You don't weigh historical data. It's a sudden, immediate insight into the absolute core essence of a situation.
Just a flash.
Exactly. And the second characteristic is sensitivity. This is the ability to pick up on intrinsic, hidden elements within a really complex phenomenon. You're basically sensing the signal through the noise, even if you couldn't possibly articulate what that signal actually is.
Okay, that brings up a really interesting visual for me. Think of it this way for you listening. Imagine building a logical conclusion is like painting a portrait brushstroke by brushstroke. You notice a person's eye color, then you observe the tension in their jaw, then you analyze their tone of voice.
Right, taking in all the pieces.
Yeah, and eventually, after compiling all those individual brushstrokes of data, you step back and say, this is a picture of an angry person. That is logic. But this intuition being described here is more like facial recognition software.
Yes.
It doesn't do brushstrokes. It doesn't analyze the jawline. It just instantly scans the whole picture at once and immediately registers threat.
That is a perfect analogy. I mean, it completely bypasses the conscious step-by-step assembly of the picture. And that actually leads directly into the third characteristic, which is non-logicality.
Non-logicality.
Okay, right. Intuition bypasses concepts, judgments, and typical reasoning. Instead, it rapidly projects what the source calls an intuitive recognition pattern directly onto an object or situation, which just generates an immediate impression.
But I have to push back on this idea of non-logicality being a virtue. Because, well, if this process completely bypasses logic, how do we know it's not just our brains jumping to lazy conclusions?
Well, that's the trap, right?
Yeah, like how do we know it's not just bias or past trauma or, anxiety masquerading as a sixth sense? If I have a phobia of dogs, my intuition might tell me every golden retriever on the street is a mortal threat.
And that is the natural skepticism we all bring to this, and it's a super vital question.
Yeah.
How do you tell the difference between a panicked brain and true intuition? The argument here in the text is that instinct driven by fear or bias usually feels really chaotic. It's panic-inducing, it's noisy, and it's rooted in past negative experiences trying to, project themselves onto the present.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, whereas true intuition is characterized by a strange clarity. It's calm, almost detached. It's not a lazy shortcut. It's a highly valid, unfiltered perception of reality happening faster than your prefrontal cortex can even process the inputs.
Yeah.
It's capturing the essence of the moment before the brain can pollute it with anxiety.
That makes a lot of sense, actually. It's the
Yeah.
difference between a smoke alarm going off because there's an actual fire versus a smoke alarm glitching out because the battery is dying.
Yes, exactly.
And that sets the stage for the real world, like literal life and death examples of this clarity in action from the essay. So the author shares a deeply personal anecdote from November 2nd, 2006, and it perfectly demonstrates this instantaneous nature.
This story is wild.
It really is. So the author is at home, and his wife is traveling on a bus. And out of nowhere, he gets this overwhelming, completely inexplicable feeling of uneasiness. His intuition is screaming at him that something serious is about to happen to her bus.
But he doesn't have any logical reason to think that.
None. He doesn't, call the bus company to check their maintenance records or look at the weather. He immediately just starts praying to the greatest creator to keep her safe.
And we have to look at what was happening simultaneously on the other end of that connection from the wife's perspective.
Right, because when she finally gets home, they compare notes. And she tells him that when they were about 70 to 80 kilometers away from their destination, she started to feel incredibly anxious and physically uncomfortable.
Out of nowhere.
Out of nowhere. Again, for absolutely no reason. She was sitting in the back of the bus, and she felt so uneasy that she got up and physically moved to an empty seat further up the aisle.
And the timing of that decision is what makes this so chilling.
Just 10 minutes later, the tire directly underneath her original seat exploded.
Unbelievable.
And this wasn't just, a flat tire on the highway. There was a massive bang that literally blew a huge hole right through the floor of the bus under that specific seat. Metal was flying everywhere. The text even notes there was a newlywed couple on board, which just adds this incredibly poignant human element to how tragic this could have been.
Yeah, it really does.
But his wife was entirely safe, simply because she listened to a feeling that had absolutely no logical basis. In this worldview, that instinct isn't random. It's a direct signal from a higher power or the greatest creator intervening through intuition.
It's a profound survival mechanism. And what's fascinating is we see this exact same mechanism applied in highly procedural, completely non-spiritual environments too.
Right, the police story.
Yes. The text gives this example of a U.S. police detective working a cold case. So the police are trying to track down a criminal, and they have it narrowed to a map of 3 potential areas. But the trail is dead.
Nothing to go on.
Right. No cell tower data, no informants, 0 new leads. This seasoned detective is just staring at the map. And suddenly, he points to a highly specific spot and says, the criminal is right here.
Just points at the map.
Just points. He doesn't justify it with behavioral analysis or anything. The police move in, and they apprehend the suspect exactly where the detective pointed.
Oh, wow.
And when they asked him how he knew, his answer was simply, no reason, my intuition told me.
See, here's where it gets really interesting. Because I want you to put yourself in that detective's shoes for a second. If you were writing an official police report, you can't exactly put vibes as your primary evidence.
No, the captain wouldn't love that.
Our entire justice system, our whole modern society, is built on the requirement of external verifiable facts. So how do we handle this tension? Like when your internal non-logical intuition tells you one thing, but the external facts of the world demand something entirely different.
It is the ultimate clash. It's where the subjective experience collides with objective reality. What happens when intuition is positioned directly against hard evidence in a courtroom?
It's a scary thought.
It is. The text brings up a really fascinating case study from a late 1998 Procurator at Daily article. The title of the article is, Based on Intuition, I Concluded He Was Innocent. It details the story of a man named Mr. Thomas, who was serving as a juror in a horrific child molestation case.
Okay, the stakes literally could not be higher here.
No, they couldn't. And the evidence against the defendant, a man named Cherwak, it looked completely insurmountable. Cherwak had been administered a polygraph test, and he failed it.
Oh, wow, okay.
On top of that, the 13-year-old alleged victim was taking the stand and testifying directly against him. A failed lie detector and an eyewitness victim.
This is where I struggle, because the logical brain demands a guilty verdict here. Breaststroke by breaststroke, The picture is terrifyingly clear.
Huh.
I mean, if a jury ignores a failed lie detector and a victim's tearful testimony, the entire justice system is flying blind. You are opening the door to absolute chaos.
Which is exactly why Thomas, the juror, initially caved to the intense pressure from the other 11 jurors. He reluctantly voted guilty, and Sherwag was sentenced to 10 years in prison.
You voted guilty, but...
But he was absolutely tormented by this decision. Despite all the hard, empirical evidence, his intuitive recognition pattern kept telling him that this was a carefully arranged scheme. He couldn't sleep, he couldn't let it go. It was that calm, persistent clarity we talked about earlier.
Right.
So this frugal elderly man actually took his own life savings and used it to hire an appellate lawyer for the very man he had just helped send to prison.
It is a massive gamble. I mean, he's betting his entire financial ruin against polygraphs and eyewitnesses just because his internal facial recognition software flagged a glitch in the matrix. If he's wrong, he's bankrupting himself to defend a predator. But if he's right, well, what actually happened?
The verdict was overturned.
Wow.
The 13-year-old boy eventually broke down and retracted his entire accusation. It turned out exactly as Thomas had felt in his gut. It was a fabricated scheme. The boy made the whole thing up in a desperate attempt to stop his mother from marrying the defendant. Thomas became a local hero.
That is just incredible. And there's another crime story in the text that mirrors this perfectly. A major murder suspect is brought into a precinct. All the available physical evidence points directly to him. The logic is tight.
Slam dunk case.
Right. But an investigating officer happened to observe this suspect going completely out of his way to help an injured child in the station. The officer's intuition screams that a person demonstrating that level of, spontaneous, unguarded care could not possibly be capable of the brutal murder sitting on his desk.
That essence again.
Exactly. And that completely non-logical feeling drove the officer to keep digging, to investigate deeper, when literally everyone else in the department was ready to close the case. And eventually, he found the hidden evidence that fully exonerated the man.
This raises an important question, though. How much weight should we really give our intuition when it directly contradicts things we view as infallible? The underlying theme here is that intuition is uniquely equipped to capture the true essence of a person or a situation, far better than surface-level facts can.
Because facts can be manipulated.
Right. A polygraph can be failed due to general anxiety or a fast heart rate. A witness can lie. But the intuition pierces through the mechanics of manipulation to see the raw truth underneath.
It's one thing to trust your gut when your life is on the line in a bus or when you're judging human character in a courtroom. But what happens when we apply this to fields that are supposed to be purely objective? Like math, chemistry. Is there room for vibes in hard science?
It completely disrupts how we view scientific discovery. We usually think of science as the ultimate triumph of logical brushstrokes. But there's a strong argument here that intuition is the absolute bedrock of logic itself. Think about Socrates.
Okay.
He famously made a bet with a group of nobles, claiming he could get a young, completely uneducated 8-year-old slave to state the Pythagorean theorem.
A kid who had never been to school, never studied geometry, didn't even know what a theorem was.
Exactly. And yet, through a simple, guided dialogue, Socrates drew the complex mathematical theorem right out of him. The philosophical implication here is staggering. It suggests that human wisdom is already hidden within our hearts. It is pre-installed.
Pre-installed?
Yeah, intuition isn't about calculating new information. It's simply the mechanism we use to bring pre-existing universal truths to the surface.
Wait, so under this theory, we don't actually learn anything new, we just remember it. That completely upends the modern educational model, which, assumes a student is an empty vessel you just pour facts into.
It definitely upends it. And we see this exact pre-installed wisdom play out with childhood prodigies.
Oh, like the Gauss story.
Yes, the mathematician Gauss, known as the Prince of Mathematicians. When Gauss was just 10 years old, his math teacher, Mr. Brittner, gave the class one of those tedious busy work assignments meant to just keep them quiet. He told them to add the numbers 1 through 100 together.
Which is a nightmare for a 10-year-old using standard logic. I mean, 1 plus 2 is 3, plus 3 is 6, plus 4 is 10. That would take an hour.
Right. But the second the teacher finishes explaining the problem, Gauss walks up and drops his slate on the desk with the answer. The teacher assumes he's cheating or just being rebellious and ignores it. But when he finally checks the slates, Gauss is the only one who got it right.
50-50.
He wrote 50-50. He had instantly recognized the hidden pattern that 1 plus 100 is 101, 2 plus 99 is 101, and there are exactly 50 of those pairs. He had absolutely no prior knowledge of summing sequences. It was pure, exceptional, intuitive reasoning.
Just skipped all the brushstrokes.
Yeah. Mr. Brittner was so stunned he bought the kid a top-notch arithmetic book and admitted, "You have surpassed me. There is nothing more I can teach you."
That is so cool. And we see this leap beyond logic in chemistry, too, with the Russian chemist Mendeleev. Mendeleev spent an excruciating amount of time trying to organize the relationships between chemical elements. He had all the raw data in his head, but he couldn't find the architectural pattern to create what we now know as the periodic table.
The missing link.
Right. So after 3 completely sleepless nights of forced, grueling, logical thought, his brain just quits. He collapses on his desk and falls asleep.
He exhausted the logical pathways.
Completely. And the moment he falls asleep, his intuition takes over. He dreams of the elements perfectly arranged in their rightful places. He wakes up, quickly jots down the table he saw in the dream, and later realizes it only needed one single minor correction. Which kind of brings up that great advice from the text, let's go to sleep with our problems in mind.
I love that.
But this brings us to a massive friction point. Does this mean intuition is just our subconscious acting like a biological supercomputer? Like, while Mendeleev was sleeping, his brain was just silently compiling millions of lines of heavy code in the background? Or is it something more mystical, like Socrates believed, where Mendeleev tapped into a universal grid of knowledge?
It's the ultimate debate. The computational theory suggests the subconscious is just really good at organizing data we've already collected. But the mystical theory, which is what this framework of spiritual perception leans toward, argues that we are accessing truths that exist independent of our personal data collection.
Because the 8-year-old didn't have the data for the Pythagorean theorem.
Exactly. It's why an 8-year-old can understand it without having the prior data. And this concept doesn't just stay confined to prodigies and philosophers. It scales all the way up to the global stage, operating at the highest levels of power.
It's fascinating to look at how this plays out on the global stage, entirely separate from the politics of the decisions themselves. We see leaders throughout history pointing to this invisible force.
Constantly. I mean, Plato famously referred to intuition as the eye of the soul, the only true way to see reality. Prince Charles of England once stated that the deep instinctual intuition within each of us provides the most reliable guidance we can possibly find in life, far beyond any advisory committee.
And it extends to some of the most consequential decisions of the modern era, too. Former U.S. President George W. Bush famously told the journalist Bob Woodward that intuition was a key driving factor behind the monumental decision to go to war in Iraq.
Right.
He stated directly, "I believe in intuition. I act on instinct." And again, neutrally speaking, regardless of how anyone views the outcome of that specific historical event, it is a prime example of how instinct and gut feelings drive history at the absolute highest levels of geopolitical power.
Oh, without a doubt.
So what does this all mean? We have tires exploding on highways, math prodigies seeing invisible equations, chemists dreaming up the building blocks of the universe, and world leaders altering the course of history based on a feeling.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the underlying thesis here is incredibly humbling to the modern ego. The argument is that sometimes all of our rigorous logic, all of our carefully plotted spreadsheets, and all of our accumulated worldly experience, well, in the face of true intuition, those things are actually secondary tools.
They're just the brushstrokes.
Yeah, they're the brushstrokes we use to explain the picture after the fact, but they aren't how we actually see the picture.
So for you listening, the practical takeaway here is remarkably simple but deeply challenging to implement in a data-driven world. Whether you're trying to figure out if you should trust a new acquaintance, or you're choosing a career path, deciding on a workplace, traveling, or just trying to navigate the complexities of your future, don't just pull out the pros and cons lists.
Right, put the list away.
The argument is to first take a moment, quiet the logical noise, and just feel it out. Let the facial recognition software of your soul run its scan. Follow your intuition when necessary.
Which leaves us with a rather profound, unscripted question to ponder. If intuition truly is a sixth sense, functioning just like our sight or our hearing, can it be trained and strengthened like a muscle?
Oh, that's a good question.
Right. Or, perhaps more concerningly, does living in our modern world, a world utterly obsessed with hard data, endlessly glued to smartphones, and paralyzed by constant overthinking, does all of that actually blind the eye of the soul? We have to wonder how often we're demanding to see every single brushstroke of logic when we already hold the entire picture.